Do you want to manage Windows laptops from anywhere using Microsoft Intune? Or maybe you have employees using their own laptops and you're wondering, how do I securely enroll those devices into Intune? Then this video is for you. Today, we are going to understand Windows device enrollment in Microsoft Intune, including automatic enrollment, bring your own device scenario, device limits, platform restrictions, and the important settings you should configure before users start enrolling devices. And yes, we would also look at how BYOD enrollment works in practice. So, stay with me until the end because one small enrollment setting can be the difference between a successful enrollment and a device that simply refuses to enroll. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you are learning Microsoft Intune, Microsoft Entra ID, Endpoint Management, or preparing for an Intune administrator role, you are in the right place. This is day 5 of our Microsoft Intune learning series, and today our focus is Windows enrollment. If you are enjoying this series, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the upcoming hands-on Intune videos. Now, let's get started. Before Intune can manage a Windows device, that device needs to be enrolled. Think about enrollment like giving Intune permission to say, I know this device, I know who is using it, and now I can manage it according to company policies. There are several ways to enroll a Windows device. In general, we have four important methods. The Windows automatic enrollment is used mainly for corporate owned devices. The BYOD or user enrollment is used where employees enroll their own personal devices to the corporate. The Windows Autopilot is another extremely useful method which is used for preparing and deploying new Windows computers automatically. And finally, co-management with Configuration Manager. Don't worry if these names sounds confusing right now. The easiest way to remember them is if it's a corporate device, go for automatic enrollment or autopilot. If it's a personal device, go for BYOD enrollment. If it is already using Configuration Manager, consider co-management. Let's start with automatic enrollment. Inside the Microsoft Intune Admin Center, we find options to configure automatic enrollment. Let's see how that is done. This is my lab environment. We'll go into Intune Admin Center. On the Intune Admin Center, click on Devices, move to Enrollment. Here you would find options to perform automatic enrollment. Go ahead and select automatic enrollment. This is where the configurations need to be performed. If you want any device that is discovered in your environment can automatically get enrolled into Intune and Entra, you need to select all. By selecting all, it mentions that all users who are part of your organization would be able to register their laptops, their personal laptops, or enroll their personal devices with Intune. If you want to, however, restrict this permission to some devices or some users, you can go ahead and click on some and select the groups who you need to give permission to. Since we are going to give all users the permission, I'll select on all. And once the changes are made, you need to click on save. If you have a new tenant, this setting would probably be enabled by default. However, if your tenant is a bit old, you might have to go and specifically enable this setting in your device enrollment, after which the users would be allowed to automatically enroll their Windows devices into Intune. Let's now talk about something simple yet a very useful information, which is the Windows device categories. Device categories basically helps you to organize devices. It's created mainly to segregate devices based on category. So, for example, imagine your company has different departments, for example, sales, HR, finance, and IT. And each department has a definite set of laptops, a definite configuration of laptops that needs to be provided to them. So, those devices can be segregated or divided into categories, such as sales categories, sales laptops, HR laptops, finance laptops, and IT laptops. Instead of looking at hundreds or thousands of devices and wondering who owns that and how we can categorize this, putting in device categories it is a good step, is a good method to segregate the devices. Device category configuration is not a compulsory step in your tenant, in your organization, depending on if it is a large organization or a small organization, and how the devices are categorized, how the devices are identified. You can either have device categories created in place or you do not have device categories created in place. This is not a compulsory step, but it is rather a good to have one. Device categories can also help and support creating dynamic device groups. So remember, device categories are optional, but good organizations saves a lot of administration later. So if you put in device categories, it would help you create dynamic device groups as per the device categories, and it's a good to have option. It is not a compulsory step. Let's now come to understand one of the settings that the users often forget, which is the device settings. Before users start enrolling their devices, they must always check the device settings. Where are the device settings found? The device settings are found in Microsoft Entra Admin Center. These are used to configure the privileges that allow the users to enroll their personal devices to Entra and Intune. And this setting specifically needs to be configured before the users start trying enrollment of their devices. So let's see how the device settings can be configured. We'll move back again to Microsoft Intune, but this time we will go to Entra. So to configure the device settings, we would go to the Microsoft Entra Admin Center, click on Devices. Under the devices, you will find a setting called as Device Settings. Open the device setting, and here you will find all sorts of combinations for providing permissions to user. If you want to provide all users of your organization the privilege to bring their own device and join the devices to Microsoft Entra, you can select all. If there is a specific group of people who you want to give that specific permission to perform their domain joins, they can be administrators or they can be IT people who are specifically responsible for joining the devices to Microsoft Entra. You can go ahead and click on selected and then select the user group who you want to provide this option. And if you do not want to give users any sort of freedom to enroll their devices or join their devices to Microsoft Entra, if you want the users that they specifically use group policies or they use Windows Autopilot to get the device enrolled, you can go ahead and select on none. For this situation, we'll click on all. The second setting is user may register their devices with Microsoft Entra. This allows the users to perform workplace join or if they want, they can perform the device registration. So this is by default set to all. If you want that the users use Microsoft Authentication or MFA that is configured on their part, when they perform the registration and the device join, you can go ahead and select yes. By default, it is set to no because the conditional access is configured right now to provide the Microsoft authentication while they log in or they register. Now, how many number of devices per user can be registered? By default, it is set to 50. You can the recommended option is 20. You can reduce it to 5 or you can increase it to any custom number or even put it unlimited. For our scenario, we'll set to 5. Then for there are local admin settings. Do you want the global administrator role is added as the local administrator on the devices when the Microsoft Entra join is performed? This is a preview setting right now, but it's selected by default as yes, so we'll leave it as is. And then when the user is registering, that user is also added as the local admin of the device. If they are doing it on their own, if they are doing it by themselves, the users who are registering the device, they would also be added as a local administrator on the device. This is also in the preview mode, but it is selected as all. Then if you want to enable the lapse solution, if the local administrator password solution is deployed in your environment and while the user is enrolling their device, you decide that the lapse permission should be applicable to that specific user or the specific device, you can go ahead and select yes. In my test tenant, the lapse is not configured, so I'll leave it as no. And then if you want to restrict users from recovering their BitLocker key for their own device, you can go ahead and select yes. As per your organization need, for my organization, BitLocker keys are not being pulled in right now in my lab environment, so it is kept as no. So the only change that we have made is setting the maximum number of devices per user. So one user in this tenant can enroll up to 5 devices. That's it, not more. So with this change, I'll go ahead and click on save. So these are the settings of the devices, the device settings. Based on these settings, while the users enroll their device, the device starts to behave or starts to react when the device gets enrolled or registered to Entra. So why is this device setting important? The device setting is important because it allows us to understand who joined the devices to Microsoft Entra. So the device ownership, the primary user of the device, all those settings, all those attributes are mentioned in Entra, all those are captured in Entra when the device is enrolled. It also gives us an idea about who all are allowed to register the devices. Is it all users who are allowed, or is there a specific group of users? Only those users would be able to enroll the laptops or the desktops or register the devices to Entra. It also tells us how many devices can one user have. The ownership of the devices, how many devices ownership can a single user have. Right now we have set it to 5. Depending on what the organization is, how the organization works, what kind of management the organization has, that number can be changed from 5 to unlimited. It can be infinite number of devices a single user is managing or handling. It also mentions, or it also talks about what happens with the local administrator permission. If you want to give users who are enrolling the device local administrator rights on their system, you can check the settings that we have seen just right now. If you do not want them to give that local administrator rights on their devices, that's also totally fine. There is an option to disable that. So these settings might look small, but they do have a very big impact when it comes to device management for specifically for larger organization. So before you start the enrollment, it is very important to check the device settings on Entra, because if you do not check the device settings and it had some sort of restrictions, just imagine telling 200 employees that they can bring in their personal laptops and they can start enrollment. And then you discover, once they start reporting the issues and the errors, you discover that the required enrollment permission wasn't configured correctly. So that gives a wrong impression. And it is not the kind of Monday morning any administrator would want. So before starting to perform any sort of Entra registration of devices or enrollment of devices to Intune, always go and check the device settings. Another important setting that needs to be checked is the enrollment device limit restrictions. Kind of similar to what we saw in Entra, but this setting is found in Intune. It controls how many devices one user can enroll into Intune. Now you need to understand that registering a device in Entra and enrolling the device to Intune are two different things. A device can be registered into Entra, it can be Entra joined, but it doesn't mean that if the device is registered in Entra, it is managed by Intune. There can always be a different MDM authority, a different MDM mobile device management technology or software that is residing in your organization, which is being used to manage the devices. So when you talk about device registration, it is registering the devices into Entra. But for Intune, we talk about the device enrollment. So along with giving privilege or giving access to the users to register the devices into Entra, if you want the devices to be managed in Intune, you need to give the users some access, some privileges, so that they can start enrolling their devices into Intune after they get their devices registered to Entra. So, how do we check the device limit restrictions that are present in Intune? To do that, go to Intune Admin Center, click on Devices, click on Enrollment, go to Device Limit Restrictions. Here, there is a default restriction that is created, which is applicable to all users and all devices. This is present by default. If you have an Intune tenant, even if there is no configuration, the device limit that is set here is 5. So, as per this, the maximum number of devices a user can enroll in Intune is 5. It can be reduced to 1 or it can be increased to 15. The maximum number of devices that Intune allows to enroll for a single user, the number of devices that Intune allows to enroll is 15. Unlike Entra, it is not unlimited. There is no option for unlimited. It can be increased to 15 and the least number of devices is 1. By default, we have set it to 5. It is similar to what we have in Entra so that there is no conflict between Entra registration and Intune enroll. But depending on which organization you are working for and you are working with, this number will vary and fluctuate. So since we have not made any changes, we'll just go ahead and click on cancel. But you can also go ahead and create a restriction. So this restriction, if you want to create, you can go ahead and create. You need to provide the device limit, the scope tags if you have that configured, assign it to a specific group of users, a specific group of devices, whatever you want to do here, and then you can create it. We won't do it because we already have that one and that's enough for our testing purposes. Now, why is this important? This is important because there can be a situation where one user account is being used to register 30 or 40 devices in Entra. And it doesn't need to be intentional, it can also be accidental. Or it can also indicate very poor device management. If the Intune administrator in your organization is not quite aware of such sort of restrictions, it can also indicate a poor device management scenario. And it can create a lot of confusion and a lot of complexities in future, specifically when you talk about troubleshooting and all of that. So by defining this limit right here in Intune, another layer of control is added. So even though it is mentioned that in Entra, one user can have unlimited number of devices, they can register unlimited number of devices. Intune from its end puts in a restriction for the number of devices a specific user can enroll into Intune, regardless of whatever the group membership is, regardless of how many users is set in Entra. This is something that tells that this is the specific number of devices a single user can enroll into Intune, which means that that specific user has control over this device limit, and that limit for our environment is set to 5. It can be 1 and it can be maximum increased to 15, not more than that. The next setting that we have is the device platform restriction. Now this is where you decide which type of devices or which type of operating systems are allowed to be enrolled. Now there can be a situation in organizations where a specific organization restricts a specific type of operating system. They do not want that specific operating system to be used and enrolled in their environment as corporate device or as personal device, accessing their office resources, accessing their organization data. So, using this platform restriction, those kind of control can be implemented when it comes to device registration and device enrollment with Intune. So the different types of operating systems are mentioned here, and depending on what operating system is allowed and what operating system is blocked or denied, the organization could decide whether they allow certain type of personally owned devices to be enrolled into the organization or not. And this is very important with regards to security when we talk about security and data access privileges and all of that, because let's suppose an organization is present who doesn't want that any of their resources, any of their organization data is being accessed from Android because they have security restrictions that cannot be applied to Android. So they do not want Android devices being used to access their organization data. In that situation, this setting comes very handy. You can simply deny Android devices to be added to the, what do you say, to be added to the Intune tenant or to be added to Entra. And they cannot be registered, they cannot be enrolled. So naturally, they won't be able to access the organization data and organization resources. This is a good way to add another layer of security as part of the device management and as part of security configurations. So how do we set the device platform restrictions? To do that, we'll again go to devices, click on enrollment. Here you'll find an option called as device platform restrictions, which will let you know if you can configure a specific configuration or not. And you can see what kind of restrictions are there, what operating systems can be managed or can be restricted. So you have Windows restriction, Android restriction, Mac operating system, iOS, Vision OS, and tvOS. And these are some things that are created by default. So there is a default policy that's created for all. If you want to use the default policy, you can use it. If you want to create a new restriction, you can create it. For this, we will see the Windows restrictions. So you can just click on that restriction. It is applicable to all users. If you go and check the properties, you will find that for for that specific device enrollment restriction, all of these are allowed. So this is the minimum number of devices that you can add, the minimum version of operating system that you are allowing in your organization and that you can add. It's mentioned here. So there's a minimum version, there is a maximum version. If you want, you can specify it. If you do not want, you do not need to specify it. And the platform is allowed for Vision OS and tvOS, but personally owned Vision OS devices or tvOS devices is currently not applicable. And if you want to block specific manufacturers, you can specify their names that these specific devices from these specific manufacturers would be blocked. They won't be allowed in here. And then for the personally owned devices, what you need to allow above whatever is allowed. So if I want, I can add Android Enterprise, and we'll see in our later videos in this series that we would have Android enterprises with work profile being added to the environment, and the device administrators would be added. And we will also see the Windows MDM configuration that is being done for the personally owned device. So that is also allowed. And there is no minimum or maximum OS version specified. But if you have any specific restriction, let's suppose there are applications which work only on Android OS 30 and not lower versions of Android OS, but it works on 13 and later. And it also doesn't work on Samsung devices, the Samsung Androids. So you can specifically mention the minimum here as Android 13. You can mention the maximum, or you cannot mention the maximum. You can just leave it as is. So then it looks as 13 or later. And for the manufacturers where you do not want to add or you want to block those specific manufacturers, you can just mention, for our case, it would be Samsung. So you can just mention it as is. So this is something that is editable. Even if it is a default configuration, you can go ahead and you can edit it. So these are the restrictions that are not supported right now, so it is not applicable. So even though I have Vision OS and tvOS, I cannot restrict these operating systems to be added like as a personally owned device, I cannot do that. But for these configurations, we can do. So we can also specify the Android enterprise versions, the minimum range and the maximum range of the version. iOS or iPad OS, we can add. We can add the Windows MDM. For the Windows operating system, we can add the version. So that is there. And if you need to block any device, if you want to block the entire operating system from being enrolled, whether it's a corporate device or it's a personally owned device, you do not want that specific device with that specific operating system to get enrolled or to have the privilege to get registered into the environment, you can just simply go ahead and click on block. If you want that a specific operating system should only be able to be enrolled in the organization as a corporate device and not personally owned. So let's suppose in your organization you want that Android devices that are there, that should be corporate owned Android devices. The Android devices should be provided by the company to the employees who will then have access to the organization resources and the organization data and other stuff on their Android device, but it should be a corporate owned device. In that situation, you can keep the platform as allowed, but you can block the personally owned device for Android. So the Android device enrollment as a corporate device, it would allow you to add the Android devices into Intune for management. It would allow you to enroll the devices in the Intune for management. But if you want that, you will add your own personal device here. Um, Instead of asking for a corporate Android device, you will add your own personal device here. In that situation, you can go ahead and block those. So it will not allow enrollment of any personally owned devices, but for corporate devices, it will allow. So these are some of the configurations that can be done. And since uh, nothing changed on our side, everything was as is, so it's not giving an option to save. But had anything changed, it would have given the option to save. So this is the configuration. And if you see right now, this configuration is assigned to all devices. So whatever devices are being registered into Entra, they automatically get enrolled into Intune. And when they try that enrollment, it would check basically that which operating system is trying to get enrolled. And based on the operating system, they will either allow or deny depending on what configuration or what setting you have done here. We have now reached to the part that many of the people were waiting, which is the Windows device enrollment and how it is done when you have a bring your own device situation. So for the BYOD, it basically means that the employee is using a personally owned device, but the organization still needs some level of management or security. Because it is bring your own device, the organization will like to have some sort of control over the device. So this specifically talks about the bring your own device situation where the Windows device is to be enrolled and it's a personally owned device and it has to be enrolled in the BYOD situation. So the basic idea for the bring your own device was that the user starts to work with their personal Windows computer. They connect the device with their organization account. The device gets registered or enrolled according to the organization configuration. And after the enrollment, the administrator can see and manage the device through Intunes based on the based on the policies that has been assigned to the device. But the entire device management rights are not with the administrator. The administrator would be able to have restricted permissions or restricted rights on any device which is a personal device but has been enrolled into the Intune tenant or registered with Entra. So very limited permissions would be there for the administrator to manage the device, but it will still be managing the device. So few of the things would be working. The user would be able to use licenses for, let's say, M365 subscriptions, if there are applications that he is running and he is working on. If the administrator wants to deploy any application, wants to make any specific application available which is required for the user, it would be able to make that specific application available or it would be able to deploy that specific application on that user. So let's start the demo. Let's now see how we can perform the bring your own device enrollment for the user. So I have a Windows virtual machine right here. If you see, it's Windows version 25H2, it's Windows 11. We'll go to the settings. On the settings, the name of my machine is Windows Machine 0. This is the account section where you can see that I am currently logged in as the local administrator. So now we are performing the bring your own device scenario where the user is supposed to enroll their device or register their device to Entra and Intune. So to do that, first you need to open the settings, click on accounts, click on access work or school, and then click on connect. When you click on connect here, essentially there are three options that you can go with. The first two options are quite evident. This is the first option which says join this device to Microsoft Entra ID. If we want to perform Entra join of the device where we want to register and join our device to Microsoft Entra directly, then we select on this option which says join this device to Microsoft Entra ID. The second most evident method is join this device to the local Active Directory domain. So in our later sessions, during our later videos, we'll see how we can perform a hybrid join device where the device is initially joined to the local or the on-premise Active Directory, and then it gets synced and it goes into Entra join, and how that scenario works, where both the environments are taking care of the device. But for this specific scenario, the third option is what we prefer. So if you read this message right here, you'll get access to resources like email, application, and networks. Connecting means your work or school might control some things on this device, such as which settings you can change. For specific info about this, ask them. Ask them means ask your administrator. So this is where we need to put our email addresses while we are connecting the device as a bring your own device. So I honestly don't remember. So I'll just copy. Give me a minute. Let me just copy the device using which I would enroll my ID. So actually, it's quite funny. I forgot the username. So basically, this is my user, which I would be using. And whatever configuration has been made for login and all of that, if MFA is being enabled in your tenant, if the password is required or passwordless is required, whatever configuration is required for your tenant users to log into a specific area, that configuration would pop up here. So when I put in my credentials, I'll just click on next and it will ask me to put in the credentials as I mentioned. So let me just put those credentials real quick. And because MFA is configured for my account, I am getting that MFA prompt. And when I approve the MFA prompt, that's when it starts to add this device and register this device. Now, this is going to take some time because it is basically registering your device to Entra join. Now, there are three terms with regards to Entra that you need to understand. The first term is Entra registered, the second term is Entra joined, and the third term is hybrid Entra join. So, when we register our devices to Entra, we are not performing a domain join kind of thing. We are basically registering a device to Entra, which means now my personal device is officially logged into Entra. It is registered with Entra, and Entra recognizes my device. It recognizes that this device it would be used to access the organization resources, the organization data. And I do not have to block this because this is an authentic device. It's not a hacker trying to impersonate a device. It has legally and legitimately, it has been registered with me, like as an Entra. So the Entra will identify this device. And if you read this right now, it is saying that this account has been added to the device. So now the organization application and service access this device as that. And if it is a shared device, then we need to remove the information or whatever that's finished. And now if you look here, right, it will show you that this is a work or school account that has been connected And this is being managed by MSFT. And if you click on the info right here, it will show you the sync details. And if I run the sync, and if there were policies that were created right now, my test tenant doesn't have that much policies. And we would be creating policies and deploying it on devices and all of that. But right now it doesn't have that. But if there were policies, it would have shown up here, right? And the areas that were managed by MSFT, it would have shown up, the policies would have shown up here. So this is one of the important things that we need to understand as to how we can add a device, a personal device with Entra. And the main difference, we can also perform an Entra join. If you guys would like, just comment and let me know if you want to see how a device directly joined to Entra looks like. If it is being manually joined to Entra, how that looks like. And this is the major difference that you will see for the devices that are joined to Entra and the devices that are not joined to Entra but are simply registered. For the devices that get joined to Entra, it shows that it is being uh, it is connected to a specific Entra ID, the company name's Entra ID. But here it is just showing that it's a work or school account. It is not showing which Entra ID the system has joined with because it has not joined. The system has been just registered. And now how do we validate that the system has been successfully registered? So to do that, you should go to the Entra Admin Center, click on the devices, and initially on the overview, you should be able to see if the device has occurred, but on under all devices, the device would be showing up. And if you see it, now you will see the difference. We have a machine. It's a test machine that was created initially. We have that which is intra joint. It's not registered, it is joint, which means it has been connected with the MSFT or my tenant, which is the MSFT. It's Entra. Okay, so it is Entra join, but the machine that we just connected, it is simply Entra registered. It is not joined to Entra, but it is registered with Entra. So we do have some capability of managing some of the settings or through Entra for that personal device, but we do not have the complete management or the overall management of this device. Feel free to leave a comment if you guys have any question, and I'll just look into the comment and I'll answer to your questions. Or even maybe create a video on your questions. So this is where we can see all our devices on Entra. And if we move to Microsoft Intune, because it is showing that the MDM is set to Microsoft Intune and it's compliant, and the registration date and activity and all of that. And one more interesting thing I want to show you guys before we move to the Intune section. If you click on that device, it would open up and there will be few attributes of the device which would be visible to you guys. So now that you can see that this has shown up. So if you see right here, it will show you the name of the machine, the device ID, the object ID of the machine, whether the machine is enabled or not, operating system, the version of the operating system, what is the join type, and then you have the owner name, like which user is the owner of the device, and then the user principal name, like which user has, like which account, user account has been used to connect this and register this device with Intune, all of that is there. And then you have whether it's compliant or not, registered or not, and all of that thing. One of the important things is also if you have configured policies to retain BitLocker keys, the BitLocker keys would apparently show up here for your devices. Right now, the BitLocker policy is not configured, and we'll look into those configuration profile and policies in our later videos. It's not configured as of now, but the BitLocker keys would be escrowed into Microsoft Entra like it used to happen when the BitLocker keys used to get stored into Azure Active Directory, not Azure Active Directory, but Active Directory, the on-premise AD. Similar thing happens here when you move the BitLocker keys here. So that's one of the things. And then you can find all the properties. So let's now check on Intune, our Intune tenant, if that device is showing up because it's showing as managed by Intune. So if you see here, you'll find that there are three Windows devices. So you can either click here or you click by platform basically. and you will see the list of devices that we have. So there are three devices. This is the device that we are talking about. And if you see, one important thing which is to notice is you can see right here about the ownership. So Intune clearly classifies the ownership of the device. If the device has been joined by the user and it is Entra registered, it is not Entra joined, but if the device is Entra registered, then it will show up as of personal ownership. Okay. So you see the device name here and it is showing as personal ownership and it's managed by Intune because we do not have configuration manager in our test tenant. So, and compliance and all of that thing, the primary user UPN and everything is showing up here. And we also have a machine, which is the test VM01, and we'll see about this machine when we talk more about the Entra join. But if you see into Entra right now under devices, that machine VM01 that is showing as Entra joined. And since it is Entra joined and not Entra registered, on Intune it will show the ownership as corporate. So any corporate device which we are talking about, it must either be joined, intra-joined, or it should be hybrid intra-joined. When it says hybrid intra-join, it means that the machine is being managed by on-prem Active Directory and the cloud or Azure Intra. And if it is just showing as personal, and if it is just showing as Microsoft Intra registered, on Intune, you will check the ownership as personal. So that's the main differentiating factor right here. With this, we come to the end of the video. But here's one tip that I want you guys to remember or follow when you are planning for troubleshooting. When any Windows enrollment fails, or if any Windows enrollment fail. And we have just seen the bring your own device enrollment in our future sessions or in our future videos. We would also see how a user can enroll a corporate device manually, and then we'll also look into the autopilot, Windows autopilot, although those will come at later stages of this series. But whenever a Windows enrollment fail, you shouldn't randomly keep checking and changing settings. Okay, so there is a series of things that you need to check. The first and the foremost thing is to follow a checklist. So you should always have a checklist that you should follow. And we have talked about this. Primarily, your tenant should be ready for the enrollment. So to prepare your tenant um for enrollment, the first and foremost thing is that you should have users in your tenant. So you should have active user accounts or user account should be available. Those user accounts should have licenses, and we have talked about that in our previous video. If you guys have not seen that video, go and check that out. I have talked about how we can prepare initially our Intune tenant if you are starting from scratch and if your organization is looking for adoption of Intune in your organization or in the tenant, how you can start with Intune, what kind of configuration, what kind of setting needs to be done, where the settings are being done, all of that. So you need to go and check the licenses. Then if the user account is existing, if the user has the correct licenses, they have the permissions, to enroll their devices, you need to go and check the MDM enrollment scope. In many situations and many organizations, I have seen that the enrollment failure is happening because the user is not part of the MDM enrollment scope, because the enrollment scope is restricted to a specific group, which is a static group, and the user is not part of that static group. So you need to check the MDM enrollment scope. Then you need to go and check the Microsoft Entra device settings. That's another very important aspect, that you need to check the Microsoft Entra device settings, which we talked about in this video earlier. Then you have the Microsoft device limit restrictions. If the devices are restricted to, let's say, five, and the user has already enrolled five devices and he's trying to enroll the sixth device, the device restrictions will prohibit him from enrolling another new device. So that's an important thing which you guys need to check. You should also look for or check for the platform restrictions, and if everything is correct on the admin side, then you actually have to go and check the device, why the problem is coming, or what the issue actually is. And that's it for today. You now understand the key building blocks of Windows enrollment in Microsoft Intune. From automatic enrollment and bring your own device to device categories, Entra setting, device limits, and platform restrictions. If this video made Windows enrollment easier to understand, hit the like button. It helps more Intune learners discover the series. And if you are serious about learning Microsoft Intune step by step, subscribe to the channel because we are building this knowledge one practical topic at a time. In the upcoming videos, we will continue with more Intune configuration, device management, compliance, and real world administration scenarios. Before you leave, comment below. Have you already enrolled your first Windows device into Intune? Yes or no? I'd love to know where you are in your learning journey. Thank you for watching. Keep practicing, and I'll see you in the next video.